How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
It's beautiful today. It's starting to get hot here in Texas. I was hoping I was gonna, you know, wait a little longer until June,
Yeah,
but it looks like it's here. And you?
yeah. It's gorgeous today. You can see the reflection in the window. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. It's probably like mid 70s ish. So it's like this is the best time of year in Vancouver. It's so nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a gorgeous place. I'm very jealous um, that you live there.
Did you ever get up to play in the Canada Cup at
I
all?
did. I
Yeah.
did when I was in high school. We played twice there, and it was so much fun. It was like my favorite tournament we ever traveled to.
Yeah, that's what everyone says. Like everyone I meet around the world, they're like, "Oh, you're from Vancouver. I love the Canada Cup. It's my favorite international event." Yeah.
I mean, you really can't beat the backdrop. Like, I mean, it's the fields are surrounded by trees, and then you have those donuts, and then
Yeah.
that's it.
They get you. Those Canadians, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I think they're onto something.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks for joining me. For some people who don't know who you are, I mean, you've written some of our most popular articles. You've written the piece on early specialization, pitchers with shoulder pain, how to pick the right pitching coach, managing pitching injuries. But let's kind of like rewind back to like where it all started, because I think a lot of people weren't even aware that you played on the 2004 Canadian national team. Um, Even and then you kind of launched into this world of medicine. Can you kind of walk me through how you started this career?
Yeah, actually, it was at the Canada Cup, believe it or not. Um, I was searching for a sport. I knew kind of sport was my thing, and I was really competitive even from a young age. So I remember we went out to watch the very first Canada Cup, and Michelle Granger was pitching for the White Rock Renegades, and they were playing against Japan. And that game went into like 14 or so innings. And I remember thinking like, oh, I want to be like that. I want to jump to the front of the circle and throw the ball as hard as I could.
Mm-hmm.
I never got to the point where I was throwing as hard as Michelle Granger, because that's ridiculous. But, from that point on, I was like, I think softball, I was very singular focused on softball. And I still am to some extent. It's like I had this softball career, and I knew in the background, like I wanted to have a medical career. And now I'm finally at the point where I can kind of join the two, which has been really, really special. Um, yeah, so a little bit about me. I have a really crazy story on how I got recruited at Umass by Elaine Sortino. So Umass is a Division I team that plays in the Atlantic 10, and that was 1998, and Danielle Henderson, who pitched for Team USA, was the star pitcher, and they had just gone to the World Series twice, and she was looking for someone to replace Danielle, and I had actually, kind of turned down a couple offers because I really wanted to play Division I, because that was the only way in my mind that I was going to ever make an Olympic team. And so just kind of by, the grace of God, really, luck, persistence on my part, my video ended up in her hands at the right time, after she'd been recruiting kind of all over the summer of 1998. And she called me out of the blue in August, of my senior year, after me having turned down a couple offers to smaller schools in July, and said, "Do you want to come for a visit?" And so, fast forward, she actually offered my scholarship to someone else in the region who was better than me, like more highly recruited kid. I was just this like kid from Canada no one knew. And I wasn't on a major travel team. I was just like being a little softball nerd, doing my best. And so she actually, after that visit, which I didn't want to get back on the plane, I was like, I'll just stay, I'll just stay in Amherst. I don't need to go back and finish my senior year of high school. She's like, no, you need to go. After that visit, and I fell in love with the campus, she was like, well, I actually have to offer your scholarship to somebody else, which I think most people nowadays would be really offended. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just wait till she says no. And ultimately, she said no. She went somewhere else in our conference, and we beat them every time that we played them while I was at Umass. But
so
I think
you were
just
right.
Kind of, I was right. I was like, I'll just wait until she says no. But that kind of I knew that kind of got the ball rolling for me. We played a really competitive schedule. It meant that I was on the national team radar. I got invited to senior national team tryouts and made the team in 2001. And because we played in a conference that we won the conference, and then that gave us a berth to regionals, it meant that, we could come to Austin and play you guys in a regional, we went all over. So having that experience, I think, really prepared me to know what it took to make a national team and help propel me to get on a national team. So I actually played on the national team from 2001 through 2006. Mm-hmm. And I was the workhorse in the back. I think, I really loved pitching us to the point where then, someone like Lauren Bay or Daniel Laurie could come in and take control. So I was very much embrace that role of just grinding it out and being a good teammate.
How did you transition to a career in medicine?
Yeah, as I said, I kind of always knew. So on my the back of my VHS recruiting tape in 1998, I wrote, I have two goals. I want to be an Olympian, and I want to have a PhD in sports medicine. And so I think now I'm a physiatrist or a physical medicine and rehab specialist. And that in my mind is having a PhD in sports medicine. So I'm a medical doctor with a 5-year residency training in the non-operative aspect of orthopedics and neurosurgery and a bunch of other kind of physical medicine and rehabilitation topics. So I always knew that I wanted to figure out why, why was I hurt? Why was my shoulder hurting? Why was I kind of bouncing from orthopedic surgeon back to family doctor, but I'm back to orthopedic surgeon, but I don't need surgery, but no one can really help my sore shoulder. I don't get it. There must be an answer. So all throughout university, I was really thinking that I wanted to put myself in a position to be able to go to med school.
Yeah, it's actually just hearing you talk about it, the complexity of it all, right? Because you have this behavioral aspect of injury that we don't necessarily think about. And then you have the rehabilitated part of the cycle for an athlete. And that's what I'm hearing you, it's you run to one end and then you got to run back to the other end to try to make sure that everything is working smooth. Is that pretty much kind of that's a very short sample of it all.
Yeah, if you think about when someone gets hurt, or if you were injured yourself at all in university, you everyone kind of functions in a bit of a silo. You have your athletic therapist or trainer, then you have your strength and conditioning coach, and then you have your skills coach. And if it's really bad, you might touch base with the physician who's you're fine. And then you get kind of sent back. And everyone's still kind of working in their silos. So what I love about PM&R, physical medicine and rehab, is we kind of know a little bit about all of those silos and can hopefully create some guide, like give the team some guidance around what sort of rehab plan makes sense for this athlete in this given situation. And where I think we really, our strengths come through is like, I would expect this individual to be back in 6 weeks or 2 weeks, or, you know, this is a really serious injury. I don't expect them to be back for a few months. So I think we do a really good job of prognosticating, and that's often our role on the medical team or on the rehab team, is like, okay, this is what this individual has. This is what we would expect. If we're not going in that direction, like, I need to hear back. And then we can, either we don't have the right diagnosis, or, you know, there's another layer of things on top of it. So yeah, like throughout it, I'm sure many of your listeners are thinking like, yeah, this is exactly what happens. I get hurt, you know, someone tries some sort of first line thing, and then I go to the doctor, and then I'm bounced back, and then I might be bounced to another doctor. Like, it's, no one really knows. And then I see the surgeon, and they're like, I'm this is not an operation thing. Like, whoopee if it is, because then it's a straight kind of like line back to playing. But if you're in this like not really sure zone, it can be really frustrating.
Yeah.
And for me, that's like right now the most rewarding medicine I practice is like, I have a teenage athlete with a sore arm or a sore back or whatever, and they're like, I don't really know what to do next. And I'm like, you're in the right place. I got you. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Just one aspect some people may have not thought about is there are people who, you know, went through surgeries prior to all this COVID shutdown happening, and then trying to manage their physical therapy like schedules, but they can't go see the physical therapist. How complicated has that been, kind of dancing around the COVID protocols and just restrictions?
Well, I think for athletes that have been injured or recently have surgery or are awaiting surgery and undergoing prehab, like, that's super challenging. You know, I think we all rely on like our therapist being our coach to some extent, right? And like, if you have an appointment that you physically have to show up to, and someone's like, do the work, then you're gonna do it, right?
Yeah.
So for athletes that are sidelined by injury right now that are working on their own, like, I really feel for them, because it's a challenge. With telehealth or like virtual visits, you know, I think there's maybe a bit more accountability than if this was like occurring in the 80s or something. So I think there's a lot that people have done via video, and I see my like colleagues doing really, really good work via video. But, you know, all of us in rehab have talked about, like, there's like the primary effect of COVID-19, like individuals actually getting sick and, you know, that whole cascade of events. But then there's all these secondary effects, like delayed surgeries or under rehabbed athletes, like, that we don't even really know the impact of at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's TBD.
I think TBD. Yeah. I think TBD on that.
What are some of the most common questions that you're receiving from your patients, or maybe even some coaches that you have a good relationship with?
About COVID?
Yes. And
Yeah.
just kind of go about handling the situation.
Yeah. I think right now, kind of my network is mostly facility owners and a few coaches, but, you know, I think mostly facility owners. And I really feel for them, because they have that economic pressure to reopen. just to be able to stay alive. And so the discussion that we've been having is like, really, how do you balance the risk of like athlete and community, of your athlete and community with the benefit of like reopening and moving them kind of forward in their skill development or rehab or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what are the factors that you would use to make this like risk benefit determination? I'm also hearing actually like a little bit of frustration, so everyone wants to do right by their athletes. Like, these facility owners have invested literally their entire lives,
Right.
like financially and personally. And and they're doing their best to adhere to kind of local public health officials. But, when national sport or softball organizations come out with kind of blanket statements, that can be really frustrating because it doesn't apply to the local situation that a facility or team owner like might find themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
So really the most common question is like, what do I make with this blanket statement? Like, what should I do about this? Is it really safe for me to reopen in my community? I mean, answering that question is really challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been directing people to the Aspen Project Play webinar that came out last week on return to sport and COVID-19. There's some fantastic resources in there. And the 4 speakers that they had, I thought really did a good job of providing some education and kind of real life tips around, should your sport reopen, this is what we feel you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And then providing some kind of higher level guidance for sport organizations that want to draft some recommendations. They also have something that I hadn't really considered up until last week, was a really comprehensive discussion on like the risks to the individuals that have decided to reopen their sport. Like, what's the likelihood you'll get insurance for playing at that field on that date? Should a transmission occur and an adverse event occur, who's liable for that, and how to kind of protect yourself if you're an organizer. I think that when you read through some of the literature, and there was a great New York Times article in the last couple of weeks about baseball and that tournament that happened in Missouri, I believe. It's like modifying the sport is kind of the least challenging part, right? Like, we can say no high fives, no spit like seeds, no sharing water bottles, stay apart, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's like the easiest part of reopening softball. I think like more challenging is this insurance piece, or like, is kind of the like support, getting the support of local public health officials so they know what's happening, and should an outbreak occur, then, here's our contact tracing plan. Should someone show up at the park sick, here's our isolation plan, to work with like the local public health authority. And then the last is spectator education. Like, I think, sure, in a small local sports game, it might be it is easier to say, you park your chair over here and you park your chair over here. But in larger events, that's like really going to become a challenge. So educating spectators and kind of controlling the spectators, I think, is a bigger challenge. So like, I think we're trying to have this discussion about reopening sport, and we think, oh, it's not like such a big deal. We'll just have like some people stand down, the edge of the field, and you just won't high five or have like little huddles, and it'll
wear
be fine.
Wear a face mask. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what's happening on the field is actually like the least of our worries right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Could there potentially be, I don't know, like listening to you talk, could we get to a point where players, coaches, spectators have to fill out like an electronic liability waiver before they even enter the park, just so those facilities can protect themselves.
Yeah, on this webinar last week, there was a lawyer from UCLA. I can't remember his name. Let me pull it up.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
Yeah. Hang on one sec. It was Stephen Bank. He's the vice dean and professor of business law at UCLA, like no big deal. And so, you know, I try, and he has a daughter who plays soccer, he said, so he's like personally invested in this question. His point was that, you know, even with the best liability waiver, if there's you know, a failure to plan on the part of the organization, you know, essentially like meets the criteria of negligence, then that waiver is like out the window, right? And so because we're in this like unprecedented time, it's like hard to really know what is the kind of like expected standard that we should be asking our sport organizations and facilities to adhere to. And so, yeah, some of the points that he had brought up was, you know, that you need to provide a duty of care that's reasonable, and, you know, that you need to be attentive to kind of like the local public health recommendations. And if you fail, you know, let's say you're in the part of the country who's still in like phase 1 stay-at-home orders, even if everyone signed a waiver, you know, you've gone against like kind of you've not met the duty of care if you've kind of gone against your local guidelines, for example. So,
are you able to share, or am I? Yeah, you can feel free if you want to share that slide.
Let me minimize here. Yeah, so this was the webinar. And it's just easier if I view. Yeah, so this was the webinar here, and I'll just keep it up here just for ease of navigation. Okay. And they still have this recording up online.
Great.
We'll kind of jump around since we're talking about this. So this was one of Stephen's slides, and it's like kind of the question of like, what do you need to do? And so you need to demonstrate that you have kind of been attentive responsive in the way that a reasonable person would exercise caution under the circumstances. So we went into a discussion about what is reasonable. And there are guidelines, but there's no real legal precedence for this. And so, you know, you would be kind of relying on following guidelines from public health departments, your sport governing body, some of national sport organizations. And if you know someone has been exposed or has COVID-19, then that's like really kind of where your highest duty needs to come in terms of providing reasonable care. And so your question, Chez, comes to like developing and enforcing protocols. So absolutely, I think a waiver will likely become kind of the norm in sport, but it's not gonna waive you from being negligent or just ignoring local public health stuff, you know?
Yeah, this becomes more complicated. Do you have any thoughts or concerns with obviously the US is beginning to open up. Texas is pretty much opening up everything. There are several different regions around the country that are creating leagues that's just more efficient for the people that are within driving distance to play softball.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts or concerns with the launch of that? Or I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. At face value, yeah, like, of course I'm concerned. I'm concerned because, there are several, there are a kind of a soup of pressures trying to influence folks to make that decision, right? Like there's an economic pressure, there's kind of a social pressure, there's like medical kind of pushback pressure, there's political pressure. So, I think like what goes into moving a region from a phase 1, which is, stay-at-home orders, to phase 2, which is where you can have more non-essential services open up, to phase 3, where I'll just share the restart plan here. This is our restart plan here in BC. So phase 1 is like essential services operating during COVID-19. So that would be like all the stuff that's been open when your region's been closed. Mm-hmm. Phase 2, we're going into that today, still asking people to stay close to home and avoid travel between communities, but like massage therapy and physical therapy, restaurants can open with sufficient distancing measures, recreation and sports can begin to open with physical distancing measures and rule modifications. And then kind of phase 3 is people traveling throughout British Columbia or throughout their state, schools reopening. And then phase 4 is like, this is following wide vaccination. Mm-hmm. So going back to your question, like, how do I feel about states reopening? Well, so this is the U.S. Olympic Committee response to COVID-19. This is Dr. John Finoff's slide. He's actually a physiatrist and the head team doc for Tokyo 2020. So phases 1 and 2, like phase 1, stay-at-home orders, training facilities are closed, you're training on your own with your own equipment and likely doing some virtual coaching. Mm-hmm. Phase 2 isn't really when they're talking about reopening sport. The USOC was proposing that perhaps we should wait till phase 3. And I know every state or region kind of defines the phases a little bit differently, but like essentially in my mind, when physical therapy opens, then we can start talking about sport, right? So if physical therapy is open in your region, then we can start talking about opening training facilities and doing some smaller group training. Mm-hmm. So I was actually really like down on, discouraged, like, I don't know when we'll see sport reopen until this webinar. And on this panel, there was an epidemiologist from the CDC, and then Lauren Sauer is from the emergency, event preparedness and emergency response group at Johns Hopkins. And there was a question and answer period of this webinar. And that was one of the questions, like, do you think sport will reopen at a local level first or an international level first? And all of them said local level first, because you can start to develop a little social bubble, so your team becomes an expansion of your social bubble. The 2 or 3 teams that you play against is also, just widens your bubble a little bit more, but that bubble's like really contained. As soon as you're going into another county or across state lines, or like flying, from Florida to California, then that social bubble becomes like enormous and out of control in terms of like knowing positive cases or high risk exposure. So mm-hmm. They were optimistic that we could return to sport at a local level before, returning to sport at a national or international level, because we're going to create these little cohorts, of a social sport bubble. For example, these little cohorts that have the same infection control procedures, likely have the same testing center. If there's a positive case, then there can be contact tracing back to that individual and others can be notified. So I'm actually optimistic that type of approach in states that look more like this in terms of cases. So this is a graph that's like cumulative diagnosed COVID-19 case rates by selected countries. So this is just off that BC Restart website that I showed you. And in BC, we're really proud of the fact that we've been able to keep cases quite low. We had very aggressive and early social distancing here. So our case burden is much lower than the rest of Canada and much lower than the rest of the world. But within each of these countries, there are regions, if this is Canada and this is the province I live in, I'm sure there are states that, like, this is the USA and this is the state I live in. So some of the conditions for kind of reopening on a public health level are that, the rate of new cases is slowing, that there's widespread testing and contact tracing, and that, with this reopening, that there isn't a large spike in cases. So I'm sure there are many counties around the United States that meet that criteria. And so, kind of after doing a bit more self-education and understanding kind of the question at hand, I think in some states, it's absolutely reasonable if they're in a phase 2 or phase 3 to consider reopening sport with appropriate physical distancing and safety measures and spectator education and field insurance, to these small cohorts.
Man, a lot of changes.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy. Like, I feel like I'm like kind of an armchair public health officer. Like, one of the things that I had put together as I was thinking about this is like, I am a doctor, but I'm not your doctor. This is not medical advice for softball, and I think every sport administrator, coach, parent, national sport body is going to be challenged by this. It's easy to sit on the sidelines and be like, do this, do that, but actual practice, it's really going to be challenging.
Right. And kind of overnight, we've all kind of become risk managers in how we live and the decisions that we make going forward, which I think it makes it so hard for people to know what's right and what's wrong. And it's just a complicated situation where I think people feel kind of hit over the head with the amount of information and the media flying all around. I think the social bubble that you're talking about is just like a huge piece to like getting momentum in the sense of like being able to eventually kind of move from our local city to a different county. And then once that's stable, then we can move even further. And then once that's stable, then we can move that further. It's not necessarily the rate that people want to hear things move at, but it's what, in terms of managing risk, it seems like a decent plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. We're in this risk management state, and here in BC, we've been advised, like, from our public health officer, that this new normal is going to be like 12 to 18 months, so we need to have a plan, right? So part of kind of having a plan is understanding, what what protects you, so certainly being outside and, if you're planning to go outside, then transmission rates are lower outside. Physical distancing measures have been shown around the world to slow the transmission. Physical barriers, so like, plexiglass and wearing a mask if you're sick, that transmits the virus much less to the people around you. But also, if you're, not sick and you are wearing a mask, there is a little bit less of a chance of transmission, although there's all these other factors, with wearing a mask, like, are you taking it off properly, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But it, I think, kind of as we move forward, sorry, my Siri is trying to capture my voice. As we move forward, we're going to have to really be responsible kind of for our own risk acceptance and mitigation, right? Yeah. So many of us, and I fall into this too, it's like, I kind of just get on my hamster wheel of the day and off I go, right? I go to my usual spots, and, I like to work out here and I like to get coffee here, and, this is the route I always go. And so I think we have to be a lot more purposeful in making those decisions, like going to the grocery store is a risk, who in my family should be going to the grocery store? Going to softball practice introduces, it increases my social bubble and introduces some risk of exposure. Even if everyone is asymptomatic, is that risk like worthwhile for me taking, And so some of the factors to consider are who is at home with you, so individuals that are more likely to be put at risk or for having a very serious response and illness to COVID-19 are people who are immunocompromised. So if they have things like rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's disease or psoriatic arthritis, or, are taking medication that would suppress their immune system, cancer, type 2 diabetes, that would put them at an increased risk for developing a severe illness in response to COVID-19. Individuals that are elderly, that presents like a higher burden of folks that have succumbed to COVID-19. And so, if grandma lives at home with you, or, someone in your family has cancer or some chronic illness, then, maybe your family decides not to put the group at risk. I'm in that situation myself. Like my mom has metastatic breast cancer. She's been through chemo and radiation, and now she's on an experimental chemotherapy. So her immune system is suppressed. She's doing really well. My parents just moved into a new house, and they they're renovating and doing all this stuff, and they need our help. And my son is their, one of two grandchildren, but they want to hang out with him. So we've decided not to put Felix back in daycare, and my husband is actually going to be at home with him the majority of the time. And that's been a really difficult, we're privileged that we can do that. And I get that, but it's tough, it's challenging, because it means that, I'm opening my new clinic, and professionally that is kind of slows you down a bit, because I'm splitting childcare with my husband, so he can do some of his role as well outside of the house. So, I think on an individual level, we're all faced with these challenging decisions. If I let my son Felix go back to daycare, then we'd expand our social bubble, and I wouldn't feel comfortable with him hugging grandma. I'm fairly comfortable with him hugging grandma now, because he's not been exposed to another kid for 6 weeks, So, I think what's really challenging moving forward is like, we're all going to be faced with those conscious decisions all the time, kind of for the next 12 to 18 months. And
thanks for reminding me. Jeez.
Yeah.
I'm
and like,
kidding.
I'm sorry, but like,
it's okay.
I don't know about you. Like, I don't like making conscious decisions. Like, I like just getting on the train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, 100%.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, you've written about and we've talked about just overuse, and in essence, like everything's pretty much grinded to a halt. What do you think? I wrote down a question kind of thinking about this. Since like we've been challenged in the sense of like we can't train like we normally have, what would you suggest athletes either reflect on as one piece, and then two, kind of maybe something new that they could try that they may have not have thought about that could potentially help them through this process?
That's a really great question. I was actually, I've been thinking about that because, you know, it kind of makes me reflect that, like, I think my best training and development over the course of my teens and 20s came when I was training alone, like throwing against a tennis court wall in my community, or running sprints up the hill, or doing work in the mirror, you know? So, you know, I would say that if that's not been your training style to this point, like, get really curious about what training on your own could do for your game, you know? So much of the homework that I give kids when I was coaching more regularly was like, I want you to go home and practice your arm circle, or like your finger ball release on your rise ball in the mirror. Like, train your body what your brain is trying to tell it to do. And I think those are the opportunities that I would want to see athletes take advantage of now, is like getting really curious about how can I understand, you know, what I'm trying to do with my swing or my throw or my pitch a bit better on my own. So the kids, the athletes, the kids that really embrace that, coaches, athletes, physicians, that really embrace that concept of like, what can I, like, consciously, I'm going to try and figure something out about myself that I didn't really understand before, that athlete's going to come back like way ahead of somebody that's just like, I'm doing my program every day.
Yeah.
You know, I'm putting in the work, you know? So now's the time to get in front of a mirror, get your, you know, now that you stay at home orders are lifted in your state, like, go to a tennis court, pitch against the tennis court, recruit your family member. You know, I'm seeing lots of stuff on Twitter where people are doing some really great stuff at home. And those are going to be the athletes that come out of this better, not the ones that are just kind of like going through the motions.
Yeah.
So sorry. Yeah. So
I was thinking about just being more conscious and intentional about what you're doing. That's kind of what I took away from what you just said.
Yeah. I think the kids that I see improve, even when we had like one-on-one practice time, were the ones that really bought into them being their own best pitching coach, right? Like, I'm just providing them ideas to add to their toolkit. They really don't need me to train, you know? And now with video, you really don't need a coach right there training you. So, getting really comfortable, I think, with asking yourself, you know, what felt good, what didn't work, what do I like, what can I throw out? And I always felt like I was moving in the right direction if it was easier to throw harder.
Yeah.
So it was like, it felt easy and I'm throwing harder, like, okay, I'm figuring it out in the right way. And when I see kids really embrace that they don't need me to improve, that's when they really start improving. Some of the things that I've been getting really curious about is like mindfulness and meditation. Mostly because like I don't have time to get in my own way anymore, you know, especially with like being a mom. All the moms out there know that like your day goes from being super productive to like you got an hour to yourself, maybe, you know, during a nap. So like if my day's not going well or someone like really makes me mad, I just don't have time to like sit there and have a pity party like I did before having kids. And so I've gotten really curious about like what is my thought pattern that kind of triggers me to be like, I'm going to procrastinate on my phone, or I'm going to like, you know, give up for the day essentially. And meditation's been really helpful. Meditation is like a lot of different things. It's kind of a blanket term, but essentially it's like creating some space between your thoughts that are doing this in a circle, like your worries or whatever you're perseverating on, like the person cut you off and they should have known. Being able to create some space from that jerk that like, you know, or worries about the future or whatever. And so in this like super stressful time where we don't know what's happening next week, next month, you know, a year from now, unfortunately, you know, and many folks are going through really tough times. Like now's the time to get curious around like how can I cut out all the BS that's happening that can be a distraction and really focus on the task in front of me, because I just don't have time to feel like exhausted and not good enough anymore, you know, because I got things I need to do. And I found that really powerful. There's lots of tools online. There's a few apps I've tried kind of over the years. Right now I'm using one called Bright Mind. And there's also Buddhify, the Calm app. And there's lots of science behind meditation and just having a bit more control over the, you know, worries that
meditation is hard.
Oh, so hard.
It's so hard.
So hard.
I try in the morning, every morning. And just to quiet the mind for 10 minutes is, why does that feel like a lifetime sometimes? But I will say that through the practice of just being still and, you know, in my body, that like I'm able to receive more just creatively, energy wise, in that regard, as much as like I hate sitting there and it's just like your mind is like, you know, it's pinballing around and it's a pinball of thoughts really. But it is like needed more now than ever, because the world, the universe is like forcing us to say, hey, stop doing, stop thinking, just be here with me just for a little while.
Totally. Well, and like, I think even like be with your true self, you know, like those worries, that chatter, like isn't often you, right? There's like a tension between what the chatter's saying and what you're trying to manifest. So, and that tension can create anxiety. It can create like low mood. It can create bad habits, you know? So we all, when we get uncomfortable, do those things, comforting things. And one of the ways we kind of comfort ourselves is allowing ourselves to kind of get lost in that pinball, because it's comfortable. So really meditation is the practice, as you say, of detaching yourself from pinballing around and feeling a bit out of control emotionally and mentally. But dang, it is hard. It's so hard.
So hard.
The more stress you have, the harder it is. So it's not like you should just like go sit and meditate and this like a joyful time. It's tough. It's tough. It's harder than practice, I think.
I know. It's like when you really sit there and can you meditate and not have like thoughts like float around and just be in your body? It's harder than people think. Go try it.
Yeah, go try it.
See what pops up in your brain. And you're like, try it. Yeah, it's a challenging act. Well, you have something to say?
Yeah, I was also going to add that in my practice, I'm seeing a ton of people coming in like pre-COVID, and I'm sure post-COVID, coming in who are improving their biomechanics, but their biomechanics aren't supported by their like basic body strength. Like they can't do a side plank for 20 seconds, for example. So, if people are looking to improve their game, I would say like plank it out, So, plank, side plank, plank variations, like you can't get enough plank right now.
Yeah.
So I don't think you need to go like crazy and get a whole home gym. Like I would love for people just to be able, when I screen them in my office and their arm is sore, for them to be able to do like plank, one leg squats, and like a reasonable kind of one leg jump and control their knee. Like, I think we've gotten so focused on skill acquisition that we've forgotten that skill acquisition can really only happen on the base of like physical literacy, to throw out the long-term development, long-term athlete development model terms. Like now, if your physical literacy rate is low, now's the time to focus on improving that. And I think I hear folks being so concerned, like, I'm not getting the practice time in, I'm not hitting enough, I'm not pitching enough. Like, honestly, you will not forget how to pitch. You will not forget how to hit,
Right.
But if your body isn't smart enough physically, like when things get going again, full tilt, like you're still going to be struggling to like keep your weight back when you're hitting, or like not fall forward when you're pitching. Like those issues are really founded in a physical literacy and kinetic chain problem. That I think we probably don't have a lot of time to talk about today, but that's really I think where I'd love to see remote coaches and coaches like focusing a lot more on. And I know there's people doing really great work. But if you're someone who's really distracted with like, I'm not pitching enough, or my kid's not throwing enough, or we're going to be so far behind skill wise, like you will not forget how to pitch, run, throw, hit.
Right. Yeah. And there's some basic things that you can do in your house or at a park, properly socially distancing, that can help kind of improve that foundation to be able to acquire those skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm hoping, I'm crossing my fingers that I can get Eric Cressy on the podcast.
That'd be awesome.
Dana's talked a lot about him and is a big fan. And then I'm hoping to have Dana on too, so we can talk a little bit more about the kinetic chain and how it relates to softball players and the pitching motion, the overhand throwing motion, the hitting motion, all the movements that are required of softball players. So hopefully that kind of opens the minds and expands the possibilities for what we can do in the softball space, because we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I feel like I'm an Eric Cressey groupie. I follow him on Instagram and Twitter and his blog. And I think my impression is that they do a ton of one leg stuff. You know, that they do some classic stuff too, like 2-leg deadlifts and squats and whatever. But they do a ton of one leg stuff. And I suspect that like college programs across the country are still doing majority kind of 2-leg stuff.
Yeah.
And if you said to someone like, let's just the back squat all together, they'd be like, no.
Yeah.
And that's like what's really awesome about someone like Eric Cressey is he's been able to follow what works because it's his business. He's not, you know, he doesn't have that like kind of bureaucratic hierarchy being like confined, you know, you need to conform to like the social norms of strength and conditioning and whatever. He can just be like, for rotational baseball players, like we need to do one leg stuff.
Yeah.
Period. So I think that would be amazing. I can't wait for that.
Yeah. Well, for people who want to follow your work or to get in touch with you and follow what you're doing, where should they go?
Best place to find me kind of doing regular content stuff is on Twitter at Kaila Holtz. And then I'll be posting more medically related content on LinkedIn. You can also find me there.
Awesome. Well, always a pleasure. I appreciate you, sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Take
you're
care
welcome.
of yourself.
You too. Be safe out there.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.